Now I will take your many fascinating questions, Question Tuesday style. I'm going to point and answer very quickly. But you have to raise your hands. Question Tuesday style questioning only works with a lot of questions. Go!
The events that happened with Margot and Q happened on May 5th. Is that in any way relation to Hank's birthday?
No. Oh, that brings up something important that I wanted to talk about, though. Thank you. It is not related to Hank's birthday, but I can totally understand why you would think that. Also, you may remember that in one of Hank's videos, he noted the fact that Jacques Chirac's Wikipedia page had been edited to read Jacques Chirac is a gay. And I used that, and I didn't change it. And you may think like, oh, that's a reference for nerd fighters. But it isn't, I promise. I used Jacques Chirac as a gay because I couldn't think of anything, like Wikipedia is a war between those who would destroy both truth and language and those who would preserve it. And I couldn't think of anything that destroyed both truth and language as effectively as those five words. And so I didn't change it. That wasn't, like my belief is that just because something happened is no reason not to include it in a novel, and just because something happened is no reason to include it in a novel. The reason it was May 5th is because it was the right number of days before graduation. It had to be like 34 days or something, and we counted back. Julie and I went onto the Winter Park High School website, Real High School, and we found out what their graduation date was this year. Like, this book technically hasn't happened yet. So, that's kind of cool. Technically, I wrote science fiction, you know? And we counted back and it happened to be May 5th, and I was like, oh god, the nerd fighters are going to think that that's a reference to Hank, but it isn't. And indeed, like, I hope that the places where you see my life, I mean, look, you guys have been staring at my face for like 2 years. So I hope that you're able to read the book without being drawn out of the narrative by being aware of its author. Like, that's something I really worried about when I was writing Different Towns, but ultimately I had to hope that someday someone who didn't know about my videos would read it. Which seems to have happened because, by the way, thanks to you, Paper Towns is going to be on the New York Times bestseller list for a second week in a row. Yes?
What were the 3 sentences that you happen to recollect the time when you took your video camera from Brotherhood 2.0 to your writers group on, I think, April something?
You mean when I was writing with Scott Westerfeld and Maureen Johnson and everybody?
Yeah.
What were the 3 sentences? I don't remember. I don't even remember. Can you give me more context than that?
You had the video camera for about 3 seconds, and then you told Hank, Steve, and non-stop drawing, and you just watched me write 3 sentences for my next novel.
Oh, I'm sure I deleted them. I mean, I delete about 95% of what I write, so that's not an exaggeration. So I think I probably deleted it. But I don't remember where I was in the book. If it was in April, I don't know. I was kind of jumping around then, so. Yes?
I'm sure that when you're deleting things, like editing your book to kind of like make it work better, you're probably deleting a lot of things that you're like, oh, I really, really like this part.
Yes.
And how do you decide, like, how do you decide that just because you love it, you can't have it in there?
Well, just because something is good writing doesn't mean that it's good writing for your particular book. One thing that I would recommend is going and finding, there's this like big annotated edition of All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren that at the back of it has the original first page of All the King's Men, which is the single best 1 page of writing I've ever read in my life. And Robert Penn Warren deleted all of it because as good as it wasn't the right opening for the book. And every time I think about like deleting something I like, I think about the fact that Robert Penn Warren deleted like 4 paragraphs that are better than anything that I will ever even approach writing. And if he can do that, then like I can delete my stupid meditations on the histories of post office boxes, which really wasn't Paper Towns. Yes?
What are some of those parts other than the
post office boxes? Post office boxes played a huge, huge role. There was so much. There were like different characters, there were stupid characters, and but yeah, mostly it was like the post office boxes, and there were all these postcards, and there was like this complicated like mail-based. Oh, and there were a lot of world's largest. At the center of the plot really were the 5 world's largest balls of twine. Like there are 5 competing world's largest balls of twine scattered throughout the country, and this was literally like the fact that Paper Towns hinged on in the first draft. So yeah. Also, I thought about offing her. Yes.
Is Bluefin a real energy drink?
Bluefin is not a real energy drink, and Go Fast is not a real energy bar. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but there are other ones that are, are probably pretty good. Yes, Travis.
Hey, how did you get your first book published?
How did I get my first book published? Well, the hardest part was writing it, which took like 3.5 years between writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. Then once I was working at the time at a magazine, and I knew someone else who worked at that magazine who had published books before, and she kind of helped me rewrite it. And then once we'd rewritten it, she was like, I think you should send this to people in New York. So I literally just did. Send like in an envelope. I actually FedExed it overnight because, you know, I expected them to read it within 6 to 8 hours. And I spent like $300 FedExing it, you know? And then 6.5 months later, someone called me and they said, I would like to publish your book. And that was done, and then I've been there ever since. So now that said, like when the book like sold, between the manuscript that sold and the manuscript that was published, like 80% of the words changed. So for me, it's a very heavy revision process. I'm a big believer in rewriting. Like, I think that on some level, all writing is rewriting. Other questions? Yes?
What's your favorite book?
What's my favorite book?
Of your books.
Of my books?
Yes.
Oh, that's much harder. Well, I would say that you should never trust a writer's opinion on that kind of thing. Mark Twain's favorite book was Joan of Arc, which is arguably the worst thing he ever wrote. Not Huck Finn, or even, you know, I don't know, all of them were better than Joan of Arc. He wrote a book about Christian Science about Mary Baker Eddy that was much better than Joan of Arc. It was terrible, but it was much better. So I wouldn't trust a writer's opinion at all about his own work or her own work. In fact, whenever someone presses something into my hand and says, this is the best thing I have ever written, I'm always like, oh crap. But I think Paper Towns is probably my favorite. I think it's the most like finished and accomplished, I hope. But I don't think it's like that great or anything. Yes?
What amusement park would you consider breaking into?
Well, SeaWorld is extremely easy to break into. But Disney is harder. But ultimately more fulfilling. Next question. Yes, purple shirt.
Who the F is Hank?
Hank is the massive incandescent gas. That doesn't make any sense to the people who know what that is. First off, really, who is Hank? No joke. That's the first thing you're thinking. And the second thing you're thinking is, Hank is the sun? Yes. Yes.
So what is your favorite book like out of all books?
It's my favorite book out of all books ever. Well, maybe Gatsby. I mean, like, it's clear that I have a profound like in this book for Gatsby, and it's also clear that I really like Moby Dick, even though Q never reads Moby Dick. Like, he's assigned it, but he doesn't read it. And I think it's also clear that I'm a big fan of songs myself. Really, really clear.
Put the beard
Yes.
back on.
High school, were you like one of those kids when you read the novels, like, who would, when the teacher asked a question, they raise their hand and they know the answer? Like,
I would raise my hand, but I was usually, like, wrong. I was definitely a hand raiser. I mean, I tried way too hard. For one thing, I would often raise my hand about things that I flagrantly had not read. And, like, I would just get absolutely owned. I remember we were reading Faust and Dr. Faustus at the same time by Goethe and Marlowe, and I was commenting on how it seemed like Marlowe was responding to Goethe, and my English teacher was like, not probable. Because Marlowe lived many years before Goethe. Is there another question over here? Yes.
For the Paper Towns movie, how is Margot supposed to be cast since we already have a really clear image of her from all the films?
Oh man. I particularly don't know how to answer that question given the particular makeup of this particular audience, since people involved are here. I don't know. That's not my job, thank God. But I will say, like, book covers change. So I bet the book cover would change, would be my guess. But I like Dana from MySpace. That's who this is, Dana.